Welcome to the Michigan's 10th Congressional District, Republican Party. We live in a democratically elected, representative republic. Elected representatives are to represent the will of those who elect them. The founders, in their wisdom, had congresspeople elected for a 2-year term, whereby voters could evaluate the performance of their congressperson and make changes when necessary. The primary is coming up, and we wanted to take a look at Jame's performance and give him advice on an especially important piece of legislation that has been put forward. In Jame's first 3 days in office, he nominated Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House. We wanted to break down his speech to evaluate the thinking of James.
For what reason does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
There you go now. Madam Clerk, I rise to nominate Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House.
The gentleman is recognized.
Without question, the issues divide us today are much less severe than they were in 1856. In fact, there's far more that unite us than divide us, regardless of our political party or our ideology. The issues today are over a few rules and personalities.
James said, the issues today are over a few rules and personalities. Here is what Matt Gaetz had to say about what was at stake.
That my colleagues and I who don't support Kevin McCarthy would plunge the House and the country into chaos. I don't think voting against Kevin McCarthy is chaos. I think $33 trillion in debt is chaos. I think that facing a $2.2 trillion annual deficit is chaos. I think that not passing single subject spending bills is chaos. I think the fact that we have been governed in this country since the mid-90s by continuing resolution and omnibus is chaos.
Single issue spending bills versus omnibus spending bills are what is at stake. Politicians hide all kinds of pork spending in these omnibus spending bills. This is Rand Paul showing you the latest 4,000-page omnibus bill. Congress had less than 24 hours to read and vote on this. James voted down single-issue spending, voted to take the cap off the debt ceiling, and voted for this omnibus spending bill.
I'm a freshman, I've only been here for a couple days, but I've heard a lot of D.C. politicians tell me about how broken D.C. is. I don't need D.C. politicians to tell me how broken D.C. is. The American people have already told us how broken D.C. is by giving Republicans the majority so we can fix this mess. While the issues at that time were about slavery and whether the value of a man who looks like me was 60% or 100% of a human being.
The notion that black people were valued at 60% of a human being comes from the Constitution of the United States. Article 1, Section 2. The third paragraph. It describes the number of representatives each state would have. The founders were opposed to slavery. They wanted to minimize the number of representative, slave-holding states would have. So here is that paragraph. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed. 3/5 of all other persons. The founders were born into a world where slavery existed. Slavery has existed since the dawn of man. For tens of thousands of years, there has been slavery. Slavery continues today. The founders put nothing in the Constitution about race. They were simply trying to reduce the voting power in Congress of slave-owning states. The Constitution was ratified in 1789. Just 74 years later, in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by Abraham Lincoln, freeing the slaves in the Confederate States. In 1865, the 13th Amendment was signed, freeing all slaves including indentured servants, a type of slavery, mostly in the North, and mostly white people. The founders get a bad rap by politicians like James, claiming they valued black people at 60% of white people. Nothing could be further from the truth. The founders, in just 74 years, ended slavery in America. Slavery had existed for tens of thousands of years. The founders set up the foundation to end it in America. Bravo to the founders.
We will stand on the right side of history again. We will end the growth of government, and we will stop 87,000 new IRS agents from picking through your pocketbooks.
Kevin McCarthy, with John James, then voted to remove the debt ceiling and continue spending at current levels without removing the 87,000 new IRS agents or protecting the southern border. Giving up the spending tool to force desperately needed change.
We will secure our energy independence. We will ban the sale of petroleum from our strategic reserves to China. We'll establish a bipartisan select committee specifically to keep our eye on the ball in China. We'll address the crisis at the border that's killing Americans by the day and improve both our safety and our nation and our dignity for those who come here in search of a better life. But
the only tool Republicans have is to refuse to pass omnibus spending bills and go to single-issue bills. Because none of what John James was speaking of was accomplished, this is what happened.
Good evening once again. I am Stephanie Ruhle, and you know we are beginning with the chaos on Capitol Hill today, brought on by the House vote to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. Keep in mind, this is the first time in our nation's history that a Speaker has been voted out of office. The California Republican had only been on the job for 9 difficult months. This afternoon, members from both parties voted to strip him of the gavel.
The yeas are 216. The nays are 210. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
Our polling question has to do with the border crisis. Here is some background.
It's time to hold him accountable. Every single person in this country who's been paying attention knows that the Biden administration has intentionally and systematically dismantled our border security. The only question left is what are Republicans going to do about it? If Republicans are serious, they're going to prevent another single dollar from being used to continue to open our borders and escort illegal aliens into our country. If they're not willing to do that, then they need to be held accountable at voting time. And so we're going to be calling them out by name, asking them to make a pledge that they will not fund the government until the border is secure. There is no comparison to what is happening under the Biden administration to anything that has happened in our entire history as a nation. It is that bad. Every record has been blown apart. And each month, the records get worse and worse and worse. And we do not have any obligation as American citizens to pay for our own demise as a nation. They do understand the crisis. The problem is that they've also got the donor class in their other ear saying, oh, this is wonderful for us. We get cheap labor and, we don't have to pay as much. The wages for all working Americans go down. This is Bidenomics that, we're essentially destroying the middle class. The poor are becoming more and more destitute, and the donor class loves it. They have cheap nannies and cheap yard care. So that's the competing issue. There is no limit to the amount of hypocrisy that we see from these members of Congress, campaigning on we must secure the border and then throwing money to escort illegal aliens into the United States in record numbers. It's got to stop. And we're absolutely determined to make it stop. We need action. We need H.R. 2. We need the House of Representatives to be telling the Senate, we are not going to fund the government until you pass H.R. 2 and the president signs it into law. I'm saying that the Republicans in the House and the Senate, if they fund the government before the border is secure, then they are complicit in what is happening on the border. And, if they want to be complicit, then they're going to, throw our money into committing national suicide, but they will be complicit. They will own the border crisis if they do that. And then come November, why should Americans vote for Republicans if Republicans are part of the problem?
It is estimated that up to 20 million illegals have crossed the border since Joe Biden has become the illegitimate president. H.R. 2 is a bill in the House, designed to close the border. The polling question is: should the Republicans refuse to fund the government until H.R. 2 is passed by the House and Senate and signed by the President? Watch your congressman to see what he does. We will be watching John James. You can get a copy of House Bill H.R. 2 at 10thgopmi.com.